Lessons for the college football fan, courtesy the NFL Draft. If you enjoy this type of content, please smash the like button. Subscribe right here to the Voice of College Football to hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live and upload new content. And, of course, share these videos out on social media. You enjoy the content, guess what? Others will as well. All right, let's get right to it. Georgia, quite a night on Thursday night, quite a weekend for the Georgia Bulldogs under Kirby Smart. They have just won a national championship and now proving that talent wins. 15 players drafted. That's an all-time record for a 7-round draft, besting the record set by the 2004 Ohio State Buckeyes, matched by the Buckeyes in 2016 and the LSU Tigers when they won the national championship in 2020. Ironically, Georgia's number of 15 just comes up short of the common draft era record by the Texas Longhorns, set in 1967 with 17. So Texas had 17 in the common draft era. That goes back to the merger of the NFL and the AFL. And again, it's ironic that Texas had no players drafted in the 2022 NFL draft. Texas, this is just a failure on epic levels. Texas, you recruit the best football state arguably in the nation along with Florida, and you had no players selected in the NFL draft despite the recruiting rankings speaking otherwise. And while we're on the subject of recruiting rankings, let's talk player acquisition, development, results on the field, and then the conclusion of the player career at the NFL draft and see what it all means. It all not only points to the SEC being the most dominant conference by far, again, in terms of player acquisition, results on the field, and player development, moving them on to the NFL, but also the trends are remarkably consistent. Let's first get to the recruiting rankings over the last 5 recruiting classes. Let's go to the very top of the board. The top 50 players, according to the 247 Sports Composite, and the SEC has a more than 2-to-1 advantage over the Big Ten at 117-46. There you see the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big 12 coming in out of the Power 5 conferences. And then we also have the figure based on per team, because it's not fair for the Big 12 in particular with only 10 schools to be compared with a total figure against the SEC. The Big 10 and the ACC have 14 schools, and of course the Pac-12 as well with only 12 schools. All right, let's take it up to the top 100 players in the nation. We're still talking rarefied air in regards to talent acquisition. Last 5 recruiting classes, top 100 players each season. So a total of 500 players recruited and signed. The SEC with, again, a more than 2-to-1 advantage over the Big Ten at 226-87. And then you see the ACC falling in line with the Pac-12 and the Big 12. And despite all the detractors, myself included, of the Pac-12 with better talent acquisition actually than Big 12 when you look at the top 50 and 100 players signed over the last 5 recruiting classes. If you look at the per school average, you see that the SEC more than doubles the Big Ten. But the Big Ten, this is pretty consistent in the trend, not just the SEC dominance at number 1, but the gap over the Big Ten, and then the gap of the Big Ten over the other 3 conferences, and then the other 3, the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 12, very close to call. Top 300 players in the nation. So this is 300 over the last 5 recruiting classes. That's 1,500 players. Once again, the SEC comes in at number 1 at 535 players signed. The Big Ten at 271, and on down the numbers there, with the ACC coming in at 233. Transfer that to per school rankings. The SEC double over the Big Ten. And then we've got the Pac-12 actually jumping up to the 3rd spot, followed by the ACC at 16.6 and the Big 12 with 15. So talent acquisition, the SEC, the clear number 1. The SEC has obviously dominated the marquee games in the postseason. During this run of the past 5 national championships, the SEC is 11-3 in the playoffs. They've won national championships in 2017, 19, 20, and 21. And so they've won 4 of the 5 national championships, the ACC, and Clemson won the other one. And in total, the SEC is 11-3 in the playoffs. The ACC, meaning Clemson, is 3-4. There you see where the Big Ten has won the only other game when Ohio State beat Clemson in 2019, and the other figures right there. Okay, those are just postseason games in the playoffs. Let's look at bowl results. And I know many of you will not necessarily be supportive of the bowl results, but let's look at the bowl results, keeping in mind that there's no question if you go through all the bowl results and the opponents, bowl results are not created equal, especially the group of 5. They do not play anywhere close to the same competition as the 5 major conferences, and especially the SEC and the Big Ten by far, because of bowl contracts against each other and because they move more teams into the New Year's Six and into the playoffs. The SEC plays the toughest schedule, followed by the Big Ten. So the bowl results have to be taken into consideration from that perspective as well, not just who cares about being there and who has the most opt-outs. So the Big Ten actually has the best bowl record at 25-15, followed by the SEC at 28-21. There you see the Big 12 has fared very well, especially in recent years at 5-0 and 5-2. The last 2 bowl seasons, the ACC has done poorly, especially the last 3 bowl seasons for the ACC at 4-6. 0-6 and 2-4. The Pac-12 has been abysmal for the last 2 bowl seasons at 0-7. The American Conference playing pretty well at 14-17. Of course, Cincinnati going to a college football playoff for the first time as a group of 5 team, and on down the line, the Sun Belt performing well against its counterparts. But again, the SEC and the Big Ten play the best competition. Wanted to do an exhaustive study that would include composite records non-conference total against the Power 5 and against ranked opponents, but that would take an exhaustive staff over the course of 5 years to run through those. But I guarantee you that the SEC has the best record against ranked opponents, the best non-conference record, and the best non-conference record against the Power 5, and the Big Ten is number 2. Once you acquire the talent, develop the talent, get it ready, and play the games on the field, and then move it on to the NFL. Well, the NFL has only confirmed what we know, that the SEC has acquired the best talent, developed it, performed on the field to provide the best game tape, and then they get drafted into the NFL. On opening day of 2021, the NFL rosters looked like this. The SEC had 335 players on NFL rosters, followed by, it's a trend. It's remarkable how consistent this is. The Big Ten at 266, followed by, yes, the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big 12, and on down the line you see the group of 5 conferences, with the American Conference, again, faring well and kind of backing up its claim as a Power 6. If you look at the NFL draft, so the rosters are comprised primarily by the draft, but also you got to consider that many of those players were drafted before this 5-year period that we're studying, and then also you've got undrafted free agents. So if we look at the NFL draft, the SEC, once again here in 2022, has dominated with 65 selections in the NFL draft. The Big Ten, it's once again consistent at number 2 with 48, far above the Big 12, the Pac-12, and the ACC. Consider the Big 12 has less teams with 10 and the Pac-12 with 12. The American Conference did extremely well with 19 selections, 9 by Cincinnati. All right, if we go back to 2021, again, it was the SEC over the Big Ten, 65-44, with the other 3 conferences coming in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, although the ACC had a nice draft season in 2021 with 42 selections, just shy of the Big Ten. There you see the numbers for 2020 with, again, remarkably, that 15 range difference between the SEC and the Big Ten at 63-48, with the other 3 falling in line. And then the American Conference in that 6th position as usual. 2019, again, the consistency right there at 64-40. And then you have the Pac-12 at 33. And then if we look at the 2018 results, that was the one season that the Big Ten did not finish second to the SEC over the last 5 years. in drafted players, 53 for the SEC, but it was the ACC with a strong 2018 showing at the NFL draft with 46 selections, and then the Big Ten with 32. If we break it down to a total number, aggregate number for this 5-year span, the SEC at 310, the Big Ten then comes in next at 212. Then you see where the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 fall in line, in the American Conference at 84. All right, that's the total 7 rounds of the NFL draft over the last 5 seasons. But what about the cream of the crop? First rounders. Let's look at the first round. And also keep in mind that these numbers don't tell the complete story. For example, the 32nd pick in the draft is a first rounder. The 33rd pick in the draft is a second rounder. Is there much difference between the two? No. But it gives us a strong indication. And once again, the SEC had a banner year in 2022 at the NFL draft. For a 16th consecutive year, the SEC had the most first rounders and the most total draft selections. The SEC with 12 in the first round this year, the Big Ten with 7, on down the line, the ACC and the Pac-12 with 4. In 2021, it was the SEC with 12, then the Big Ten with 7, same exact difference 1 year ago. But the ACC was right there with 6. If we go back to 2020, the SEC had 15 of the 32 selected in the first round, and then it was a significant drop to the Big Ten and the Big 12 with 5. The Big 12, by the way, did not have a first-round pick, not just in 2022, but in 2021. The last 2 NFL drafts, the Big 12 with no first-round selections. And then you see the numbers for 2019 with a closer contest between the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC at 9, 7, and 7. And then in 2018, the SEC at 10, and the Big Ten, that was the 1 year that the Big Ten did not finish second to the SEC. And then when you see the total numbers, the SEC with 58 first-round selections in the past 5 drafts, followed by, of course, the Big Ten. The ACC's right there with 26, and then a drop to the Pac-12, and wow, the Big 12 with only 9 first-round picks over the last 5 drafts. So what's going on here? Well, we talk about it all the time right here at the Voice of College Football, that the SEC rules on the field. It has been the best conference in college football since the mid-2000s. It was certainly a debate before that, and arguably the best conference since roughly 2005 and before, throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. But since 2005-06, no question about it, the SEC wins the most and wins the most when it counts. Okay, how has this happened? Well, let's keep in mind that people are moving west and they're moving south. This has happened roughly since the 1980s. For example, the state of Georgia is soon to have more population than the state of New York. Yes, people are moving south and they're moving west. So there's hope for the Pac-12 because I've checked out population increases for 2021 and 2022, and then the census for 2020. And actually, the largest population growth is out west, even more so than the deep south. So if the Pac-12 gets serious about competing, hey, this may show off in the next 15 years or so when states like Nevada, Utah, and Arizona are gaining so much population that they can turn those guys into football players. We'll see. But it's population shift that's working in the SEC's favor. It's also, again, working in the Pac-12's favor, but they're not putting the commitment into it. A lot of their people are transplants that are not committed to football. This should also bode well for the ACC if they take advantage. The ACC primarily in the southeast, although you do have Pitt, Syracuse, and others, Boston College in the north, but primarily the Atlantic Coast Conference is in the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. Florida State and Miami, if they get their acts together, they are in a recruiting hotbed. Florida right now is the best high school football playing state in America. Texas is close. Those are the 2. California is still very strong. Georgia's taken over the 3rd spot. The narrative for the Big Ten is that it is matching the SEC when it comes to revenue, rear ends in the seats, TV ratings. And it is playing a distant second, as we have seen in recruiting, results on the field, and in NFL draft selections, but it's still a clear number 2. But the population shift is going against the Big Ten. Can it hang on? Can it somehow be creative to stay in the race, in the arms race with the SEC? And then one other note is this complete change coming to the Big 12, losing its 2 dominant programs, although Texas has been marginal for a decade plus. Still, from a resource standpoint, facilities, popularity, everything involved, and certainly winning when it comes to Oklahoma, the Big 12 loses not just 20% of its teams, but they lose about, 70, 80% of revenue and relevancy nationally when Texas and Oklahoma leave to go to the SEC and actually add more fuel to the best conference in college football. However, of course, the Big 12 has supplemented by going out to get UCF, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati. Well, it's interesting to note Cincinnati is playing its best football in the history of the school. Just went to a college football playoff. That entry to the college football playoff was somewhat confirmed by NFL scouts by drafting 9 Bearcat players. So as long as Cincinnati can hang on to Luke Fickell, he seems to be the guy that's pulled this thing together for Cincinnati. Not that this school has not played good football in the past under Brian Kelly, Tommy Tuberville, and others, but this is the pinnacle of Cincinnati football. And now with 9 NFL draftees, that's certainly a school record by tons. Cincinnati moves into the Big 12. Maybe they can lure more top-level recruits to come to the league. Also, Houston, keep in mind, Houston and Atlanta are the best metro areas in America for high school football talent. So now the University of Houston plays in a big-time conference. And so if the Big 12 can maintain its Power 5 status, maybe the University of Houston, coming off now an American Conference championship game appearance in 12-1 season, bowl game win over Auburn, can parlay recent success and a recruiting footprint into Power 5 success. BYU has been successful the past couple of years after a long stretch of 7 and 8 win seasons. They've hit double digits now 2 consecutive years. And again, there is then UCF in the state of Florida. So while Florida State, Miami, and Florida are down, UCF moving into the Big 12 can take advantage. We've seen UCF committed to football pull off 2 undefeated regular seasons in recent years, 2017 and 2018, beat Florida in a bowl game, go out and get an established big-time coach in Gus Malzahn. Now they move into the Big 12. So there is hope in life for the Big 12. The cup half full look at the Big 12 situation is that UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU have never been stronger as a collection of 4. The cup half empty scenario when looking at those 4's entry into the Big 12 is that those 4 have never been this strong. So the likelihood that they stay this strong, the probabilities are not high. So you can look at that either way. All right, from acquisition of talent, development, results on the field, and now the NFL draft, we see SEC 1, Big Ten 2, and then take your pick. Certainly the Pac-12 is at the bottom and needs some life support, and that life support may be through population growth if they can get people interested in football on the West Coast and invested both in terms of engagement, effort, and money into playing big-time college football. Your thoughts down below right here at the Voice of College Football. Again, hit the like button, subscribe, and we will see you very soon.